Right now, while you are sitting here, your cells are locked out. That is the only way I know how to describe what is happening inside the body of almost everyone watching this video. Your body has a door. Every single cell in your body has a door, and that door's only job is to let glucose inside, to convert food into energy, to keep your brain sharp, your muscles strong, your nerves alive. But after 60, after years of too much insulin, too many wrong signals, too much of the wrong kind of carbohydrate at the wrong time of day, that door stops opening. The key still fits, but the lock has been changed from the inside. And glucose, instead of feeding your brain and your muscles and your nerves, floods your bloodstream. Right now, not in 5 years, not someday. Right now, while you sit here. Here is what that flood costs you over time. Your kidneys, filtering harder every single day to clean what the door will not accept, until one morning they simply cannot keep up. Your vision, blurring first at the edges, then narrowing, like someone slowly dimming a light that was never meant to go out. Your feet, going numb first, then cold. And if you have ever sat in a room where a surgeon used the word amputation, you know exactly what I mean. You have seen that look on someone's face, maybe someone you love. Now, 99% of people managing blood sugar have never been told what I am about to share with you. Not because this information is new, not because the research does not exist, because the research is 1,400 years old. And there is no patent on 1,400 years old. There is no billing code for it. There is no prescription to write at the end of the conversation. In 652 AD, a physician named Simiao documented a 4-part food-based system that directly addresses the locked door problem, the flooding glucose, the slow overnight damage that no one talks about, not with medication, with food, with timing, with a specific biological sequence that your body recognizes because for thousands of years, it was the only approach available. When American researchers finally tested this system in controlled clinical trials in the 1990s, the results were not subtle, and they should have changed the national conversation about blood sugar management. They did not. Today, I am going to show you exactly what Sun Simiao discovered, why it was quietly moved to the back of the room, and how you can begin rebuilding your body's insulin response starting tonight. But before I do that, I have a question. Has a doctor ever sat down with you and actually explained why your blood sugar behaves the way it does? Not just which pill to take, but the actual biological mechanism? Type yes or no in the comments right now. I read every single one, and your answer matters more than you might think. Now, I need to start somewhere that most health videos never begin. I need to show you the villain in this story, because there is one, and I promise you, it is not you. For the past 20 years, I have sat across from patients who are exhausted, not just physically exhausted, though that is certainly part of it, a deeper exhaustion, the kind that comes from fighting a battle where the rules keep changing and the victories keep disappearing. They cut carbohydrates, numbers improve slightly, then plateau. They add medication, numbers come down, then creep back up. They exercise more, results are inconsistent, and the explanation they receive at every appointment is not something is missing from your approach. The explanation is, let us try a different medication, or perhaps increase the dose. This is not your doctor's fault. I want to be very clear about that. Your doctor has 7 minutes with you. 7 minutes is the average appointment time in the current system. In 7 minutes, you cannot teach the biology of circadian insulin sensitivity. You cannot explain what barley does to gut microbiome composition. You cannot walk through the 4 changes in metabolic biology that happen specifically after 60. The system was not designed for that conversation. The system was designed for diagnosis and prescription is where the money lives. The global diabetes medication market is worth $89 billion per year. $89 billion. That number requires a specific thing to be true. It requires that patients remain patients. It requires that the condition be managed not reversed, because a patient who no longer needs the medication is not a customer. Sun Simiao's four-part system costs less than a few dollars a week. Bitter melon cannot be patented. Barley cannot be patented. Walking 15 minutes after dinner cannot be billed to insurance. These things existed before pharmaceutical companies existed, and they will exist long after. The biology did not change. The financial incentive to ignore the biology changed. And I want to tell you the history of how this happened, because understanding this history is not just interesting. It will make you angry in exactly the right way, the productive way, the way that makes people take action instead of simply waiting for someone else to save them. So let me take you back, further back than most people expect. The first recorded description of what doctors now call type 2 diabetes did not come from a pharmaceutical laboratory. It did not come from a Western medical school. It came from India around 600 BC. A physician named Sushruta described a condition he called madhumeha. Madhu means honey. Meha means urine. Honey urine. Because the urine of people with this condition was sweet enough that ants would gather around it. Sushruta did not have a blood glucose meter. He did not have an A1C test, but he noticed with remarkable clarity that this condition was connected to food, to what a person ate, to when they ate it, and he prescribed accordingly: bitter gourd, barley, specific grain restrictions, movement after meals, not pills, not injections, food, timing, and sequence. That knowledge moved slowly across trade routes, into China, into Persia, into the ancient world where medicine was still understood as biology, not commerce. Jump forward to 652 AD. Sun Simiao was, and I do not use this word lightly, the most respected physician in the history of Chinese medicine. He lived to 101 years old. He wrote over 30 medical texts across his career, and he had one principle that governed everything he prescribed: never recommend something you have not personally verified works. In his Qianjin Yao Fang, which translates to essential prescriptions worth 1,000 gold pieces, he wrote the first complete dietary protocol for what he called wasting and thirsting disease, what doctors today call diabetes. His instructions were specific, not vague suggestions. Specific. Avoid white rice flour and alcohol entirely. Replace with barley and millet. He observed that patients who made this grain substitution did not deteriorate as quickly. Their thirst stabilized. Their wounds began to heal. Eat bitter melon, kugua, which Chinese physicians observed caused something in the body that white rice simply did not. Walk after every meal, not a strenuous walk, an unhurried walk. 15 minutes, every single time. Eat the last meal before dark, never after sunset. These were not philosophical guidelines. They were a biological system, a sequence, and Chinese physicians used this system with remarkable consistency for the next 1,300 years, not because they were traditional or stubborn, because it produced results they could observe in their patients. Now, here is the turn in the story that I think every person managing blood sugar deserves to hear. In 1921, Frederick Banting and Charles Best discovered insulin at the University of Toronto. And I want to say this carefully because it matters. That discovery saved lives. Real lives, millions of them, type 1 diabetics, people whose pancreas produces no insulin at all, would have died without it. Insulin is a genuine medical breakthrough, and I am not diminishing it. But something else happened alongside that breakthrough, something quieter. Within a decade, pharmaceutical companies understood something that Sun Simiao never needed to think about. Barley cannot be patented. Bitter melon cannot be patented. Walking after dinner cannot be bottled and sold. Injectable insulin could. Oral medications could. And so, gradually, not with a dramatic announcement, not with a press conference, the food-based protocols that had managed type 2 blood sugar for over 1,000 years were moved to the back of the room, replaced by the billing code, replaced by the prescription pad. By the 1960s, American medical schools were spending an average of 4 hours per year on nutrition education. 4 hours in a 4-year degree. By the time your current doctor graduated, that number had risen to approximately 19 total hours across 4 years. Not because food stopped working, because there is no reimbursement for teaching someone how to eat. And this is where I need you to meet someone. Let me tell you about Margaret. She represents a pattern I have seen many times over the years, and her story is almost certainly closer to yours than anything else you will hear today. Margaret is 71 years old, retired nurse, 32 years in emergency medicine. The kind of woman who spent her entire career noticing things in other people's bodies that they could not see in themselves. She is precise. She is not easily fooled. And she came to me 2 years ago absolutely convinced that something was fundamentally broken in her. A1C of 9.2, fasting glucose averaging 193. She had been on metformin for 6 years. Her endocrinologist had just added a second medication. And she sat across from me and said something I still think about. She said, "I know the pharmacology. I spent 32 years understanding medications and what they do inside the human body. I am watching my A1C climb despite doing everything my doctor has told me to do. So either I am failing or something important is missing from everything I have been told." She was not failing. Something important was missing. And what was missing is exactly what Simiao documented in 652 AD. But before I can tell you what I found, I need you to understand what is actually happening inside your body, because without this piece, the solution makes no sense. And I want you to not just know what to do. I want you to understand why, because when you understand why, you cannot unknow it, and you will not stop. Here is what most doctors do not have time to explain in a 7-minute appointment. Your body is not failing, it is adapting. And that distinction matters more than almost anything else I am going to say today. Think of every cell in your body as having a door. Insulin is the key. Every time you eat, your pancreas produces insulin. Insulin moves through your bloodstream, finds the cellular doors, and opens them. Glucose enters. Energy is made. That is healthy. That is normal. Now imagine that key knocking on that door over and over, day after day, year after year. Too much insulin, too frequently, for too long. Because for years you have been eating foods that cause large, rapid insulin spikes. Processed carbohydrates, refined sugar, foods designed to be absorbed fast. The cell does what any system does when it is overwhelmed with the same signal too many times. It starts reducing its response. The door mechanism gradually becomes less responsive to the key, not broken, not malfunctioning, adapting to what it perceives as overstimulation. Doctors call this insulin resistance. I call it a cellular door that learned from experience to distrust the signal. And the glucose that cannot get through the door stays in your bloodstream. Your pancreas panics, sends more insulin. The door closes tighter, your blood sugar climbs, your pancreas works harder, and eventually, after years of this cycle, your pancreas itself begins to wear down from the effort. This is type 2 diabetes, not from sugar alone, from a door that stopped trusting the key. Now, here is what makes this particularly difficult after 60. Pay close attention to this part because almost no one explains it. 4 specific changes happen to your metabolic biology in your 60s and 70s, and these 4 changes compound the locked door problem in ways that most treatment approaches completely fail to address. Change 1. Your muscle mass decreases, and this is more important than most people realize. Muscle tissue is your single largest site for glucose uptake. Think of muscle cells as storage warehouses. Every pound of muscle you lose with age is a warehouse that has closed its doors. Glucose that would have been stored there stays in your bloodstream instead. The more muscle mass you lose, the harder blood sugar becomes to control. Change 2. Your liver increases glucose output overnight. Here is something that surprises almost everyone I explain it to. While you sleep, your liver releases stored glucose into your bloodstream. It has been doing this your entire life. It is normal. But after 60, this process often becomes dysregulated. The liver releases too much, releases it too early. And your fasting glucose, that morning number you check when you first wake up, often reflects your liver working against you all night while you slept. not what you ate the night before, what your liver released while you were unconscious. Change 3. Your mitochondria become less efficient. The tiny energy factories inside each cell that convert glucose into usable energy slow down with age, they process less. The backlog of unabsorbed glucose grows. Change 4. And this one I want you to sit with for a moment. Your gut microbiome shifts. The specific bacteria that produce compounds which improve insulin sensitivity decline with age. The species that generate inflammation and worsen insulin resistance increase. Your gut is actively changing in a direction that makes blood sugar harder to control. And no one told you because no one has a prescription for it. These 4 changes are not your fault. They are not a character flaw. They are predictable biology, documented, measurable, inevitable biology. And Sun Simiao, 1400 years before anyone had words for mitochondria or gut microbiome or circadian insulin sensitivity, designed a system that addresses all 4 of them simultaneously. Now, here is the crucial question, the one I know you have been sitting with since the first minute of this video. Can you actually reverse insulin resistance after 60? Can a door that has been partially closed for years be opened again? The answer is yes, but not with the approach most people are trying, not with more of the same signal that closed the door in the first place. The answer is changing the signal entirely, and that is exactly what Sun Simiao understood. Now, Margaret, meanwhile, had spent 6 years trying more of the same signal, more metformin, then a second medication, careful calorie counting, eliminating all sugar, all of which helped some, none of which moved her numbers consistently in the direction she needed. When I walked through her typical day, hour by hour, I started to see what was missing. She was eating oatmeal for breakfast, instant oatmeal, with fruit. She had been told this was a good choice for blood sugar management. She believed it was a good choice. She was a nurse with 32 years of clinical experience. She had done her research. Here is what she did not know. Instant oatmeal, stripped of its fiber structure during processing to make it dissolve faster, hits your bloodstream with glucose at nearly the same speed as white sugar. The slow-release mechanism that makes whole oats beneficial is almost entirely destroyed in the processing. And eating it first thing in the morning, when cortisol is at its daily peak and your cells are at their most resistant, creates a glucose flood that her medication could not fully contain. She had been doing the right thing, according to guidelines written for someone else's biology, at the wrong time of day, in the wrong form. That was about to change. And the change started with the first element of Sun Simiao's system. Part 1. The grain code. Now, I want to be careful here because I hear the same assumption in almost every patient conversation. He is going to tell me to cut all carbohydrates. That is not what I am saying. That is not what Sun Simiao prescribed. Sun Simiao was not anti-carbohydrate. He was anti-specific carbohydrate. He observed over decades of clinical practice that patients who ate white rice and refined flour deteriorated faster. Their thirst worsened. Their vision clouded. Their wounds stopped healing. But patients who switched to barley and millet stabilized, sometimes dramatically. He did not know why. He did not need to know why. He observed it, documented it, prescribed it. Science now explains why. Barley contains one of the most powerful blood sugar regulating compounds found anywhere in nature. It is called Beta-Glucan, and its mechanism is genuinely elegant. Here is how it works. Picture your digestive tract as a long corridor. When you eat most refined carbohydrates, glucose sprints down that corridor, absorbed within minutes. Your blood sugar spikes sharply. Your pancreas floods your system with insulin. The door is hammered. When you eat barley, the beta-glucan forms a thick, viscous gel inside your digestive system, a slow physical barrier. Glucose cannot sprint. It walks. Absorption takes 40 to 60% longer than without beta-glucan. The insulin response is proportionally smaller. The spike becomes a manageable rise, and this is not a small effect. A 2022 meta-analysis published in the European Journal of Nutrition, examining over 2,000 participants across 14 controlled studies, found that daily beta-glucan consumption reduced fasting blood glucose by an average of 8.1 milligrams per deciliter, reduced post-meal glucose spikes by over 20%, and improved insulin sensitivity in the process. 8.1 milligrams per deciliter from changing which grain is on your dinner plate. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration formally recognized the power of beta-glucan in 2005, approving a health claim for its role in reducing cardiovascular disease risk. Not because pharmaceutical companies lobbied for it, because the evidence was simply too strong to ignore. Simiao prescribed barley in 652 AD. The FDA confirmed the mechanism in 2005. That is, let me do the arithmetic. A 1,353-year gap between the clinical observation and the regulatory recognition. The food did not change. The biology did not change. Only the financial incentive to acknowledge it changed. The practical instruction is simple. Replace white rice or white bread at your evening meal with pearl barley. 1 cup cooked. That is your 3 to 4 grams of beta-glucan per day. That is exactly what Simiao was prescribing. Do not overcomplicate this. 1 cup of cooked barley at dinner. Tonight. Now. I need to be crystal clear before moving forward. If you have celiac disease or confirmed gluten sensitivity, barley contains gluten and is not appropriate for you. If you have kidney disease that requires limiting dietary fiber, talk to your doctor before increasing barley intake. And if you are on any medication that is affected by fiber absorption timing, particularly certain thyroid medications, take them at least 2 hours away from your barley meal. For everyone else, this is one of the safest and most well-documented dietary changes you can make for blood sugar management. But the grain code was only the beginning. Because what Simiao prescribed alongside the barley, this is where something remarkable happens. Here is what I want you to understand before the next part. The bitter principle is the component of Simiao's system that most Western patients resist the hardest. Not because it is difficult, because the taste is deeply unfamiliar, and I need you to hear what I'm about to tell you about that taste with completely fresh ears. Part 2, the bitter principle. Bitter melon. You may have seen it in Asian grocery stores. Green, deeply ridged, looks like a cucumber that had a very difficult life. The taste is intensely, aggressively bitter. Most people raised on American food put it down immediately. That bitterness, that exact quality your tongue is telling you to reject, is the mechanism. Here is the biology. Bitter melon contains at least 3 distinct active compounds that affect blood sugar through completely separate pathways. The first compound activates glucose uptake in muscle cells through an insulin-independent route. Essentially, it opens the cellular door through a side entrance, not the main insulin pathway. A different pathway entirely, even when the main door is stuck. The second compound, which researchers have called plant insulin, is structurally similar enough to human insulin that your cells respond to it. The receptor activates, the door opens, without requiring your pancreas to produce anything. The third compound, and pay close attention to this, activates something called AMPK. AMPK, adenosine monophosphate activated protein kinase. I know those are a lot of letters, but here is what it means in practical terms. AMPK is your body's master metabolic circuit breaker. Think of it as the main switch. When AMPK is activated, your cells do something remarkable. They become sensitive to insulin again. The cellular doors that have been ignoring the key suddenly start responding to it, not all at once, gradually but measurably. Now, here is the piece of information that I think deserves your full attention. Metformin, the most commonly prescribed type 2 diabetes medication on earth, the medication that hundreds of millions of people take every morning, works primarily through one mechanism. It activates AMPK. Bitter melon activates AMPK. In 2011, researchers at the Garvan Institute of Medical Research in Sydney confirmed this in peer-reviewed research. They isolated specific compounds from bitter melon and demonstrated AMPK activation in both muscle and liver tissue. The same activation, the same pathway, the same mechanism. Simiao was prescribing AMPK activation in 652 AD. He called it kugua. He did not know the molecular mechanism. He did not need to. His patients' numbers told him everything he needed to know. Now, alongside bitter melon, the second half of what I call the bitter principle, fenugreek. Fenugreek is a small seed, slightly bitter, slightly sweet, available in any Indian grocery store, any health food store, widely available, and it costs almost nothing. Fenugreek contains a compound called 4-hydroxyisoleucine. That compound does something that most blood sugar supplements cannot claim. It directly stimulates insulin secretion from the pancreas, not indirectly, not downstream. It reaches into the beta cells of your pancreas, the cells responsible for producing insulin, and improves how efficiently they function. A 1990 clinical trial published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed that fenugreek reduced fasting blood glucose by 25% in type 2 diabetic patients, 25%, from a seed that costs about $3 a pound. The practical instruction is simple. 2 approaches. Pick one. Option 1, cook with bitter melon 2 to 3 times per week, stir-fried with garlic and olive oil. The bitterness mellows significantly with heat. The active compounds survive cooking. If you cannot find fresh bitter melon capsules from a reputable supplement brand are a reasonable alternative. Look for standardized extract. Option 2, 1 teaspoon of fenugreek seeds soaked overnight in a glass of water. In the morning, drink the water on an empty stomach. You do not need to eat the seeds. Just the water carries enough of the active compounds. Now, this is the section where I need to stop and be absolutely crystal clear. If you are taking metformin or insulin or any other medication that lowers blood sugar, bitter melon and fenugreek create additional blood sugar lowering effects through the same pathways as your medication. That combination can push your glucose lower than safe, lower than expected. Hypoglycemia, blood sugar dropping too low, can be dangerous. Before adding either of these to your routine, talk to your doctor. Monitor your glucose more frequently in the first 2 weeks. And if you feel dizzy, lightheaded, shaky, or cold sweaty, check your glucose immediately and call your doctor. Do not stop your medication. Add these alongside your medication and work with your doctor to monitor whether a dose adjustment becomes appropriate over time. If you have kidney disease, the potassium content of bitter melon may require monitoring. If you are pregnant, fenugreek has uterine-stimulating effects and should not be used. Start small. 1 teaspoon of fenugreek water, 1 small serving of bitter melon once per week. Add gradually. Watch your numbers. This is not a substitute for your medication. This is a signal that works alongside your medication while your doctor tracks your response. Now, back to Margaret. This is where her story gets interesting. When I explained fenugreek water to Margaret, this precise woman, this trained nurse, this person who had spent 32 years evaluating medical evidence, looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, 1 teaspoon of soaked seeds. That is what we are starting with? I said, yes, that is exactly where you start. She was skeptical. I knew she would be, and I understood why. After 6 years of escalating medication dosages, the idea that 1 teaspoon of seed water could move any needle at all seemed almost insulting to her intelligence. She tried it anyway. By day 5 of that first week, her morning fasting readings had shifted. Not dramatically, not the transformation she was hoping for, but they had shifted. 193 had become 181. Then 178, one morning, 172. She messaged me on day 6. Her message said, "These are the smallest numbers I have moved in 6 years. Somehow they feel like the largest." I told her to hold on, because I had not yet added the elements that change everything. What was happening in her body during that first week was a gradual AMPK resensitization. The fenugreek compounds were signaling her pancreas before breakfast. The barley at dinner was reducing the overnight glucose load. The locks on her cellular doors were beginning, slowly, to soften. But there was still something critical missing. Part 3, the timing protocol. Now. This is the element that even health-conscious patients consistently overlook, and I want to address directly why most people never hear about it. The timing protocol cannot be patented. It cannot be sold. There is no supplement for it. It is a behavioral change that costs exactly nothing and requires no purchase. And for that reason, it has very little presence in the wellness industry ecosystem. Sun Simiao wrote specifically that the last meal should be consumed before sunset. He also prescribed walking after every meal, not exercise, not a fitness routine, an unhurried walk, 15 minutes after every meal. His patients followed these instructions, and for over 1,000 years, the results were consistent enough that Chinese physicians never questioned them. Modern chronobiology, the science of the body's internal clock, has now explained the molecular mechanism behind both of these instructions. Here is what almost no one tells you about blood sugar. Your cells do not process glucose equally well at all times of day. In the morning, your insulin sensitivity is at its daily peak. Your cells are primed to accept glucose. The doors are wide open. This is your biological design. You evolved in a world where sunlight meant food was available, so daylight hours became the optimal time for glucose metabolism. By evening, particularly after 7 p.m., insulin sensitivity declines. Your body is preparing for sleep. Your circadian clock is signaling a metabolic slowdown. Your liver begins increasing its overnight glucose release in preparation for the fasting period ahead. The cells become less responsive. The exact same meal, eaten at 7 in the morning versus 8 at night, produces a dramatically different blood sugar response. Research published in the journal Obesity in 2020 demonstrated this with remarkable clarity. Participants who ate identical total calories but shifted their eating window earlier in the day showed significantly lower fasting glucose, lower insulin levels, and improved insulin sensitivity. Same food, different time, completely different metabolic outcome. Sun Simiao was prescribing time-restricted eating aligned with circadian biology in 652 AD. Now, the second timing element, post-meal walking. When you walk after eating, something specific happens in your leg muscles. The contractions of walking activate a glucose transport protein called GLUT4. And this matters enormously for anyone with insulin resistance. GLUT4 can absorb glucose from your bloodstream and move it into muscle cells, completely independently of insulin. No key required. The locked door is bypassed entirely through a completely separate entrance. Your muscles, when they are contracting, create their own glucose uptake mechanism that does not depend on the insulin system at all. A 2022 meta-analysis published in Sports Medicine confirmed that even a 2 to 5 minute walk after meals significantly reduced post-meal blood sugar compared to sitting. 2 to 5 minutes, not a gym session, not 30 minutes of cardio, a walk to the end of your street and back. That is what Sun Simiao was prescribing after every single meal, 1,400 years ago. The practical instruction, 2 changes, both simple. First, move your last meal to at least 2 hours before you plan to sleep. If you go to bed at 10, finish eating by 8. If you can push it to 7:30, even better. Second, after every meal, wait 15 minutes, then take a 5-minute walk. Not fast, not purposeful exercise, gentle movement. Your glucose meter will show you the effect within 90 minutes of starting this habit. I want to be honest with you about adjusting meal timing. Eating dinner at 6:30 when your body is accustomed to 8:30 is uncomfortable. Your body will resist it. You will feel like you are eating on someone else's schedule. The hunger signals will come at the wrong time for the first week. This is normal. This is your circadian clock resetting itself to a schedule it was biologically designed for. Push through the first week. By week 2, your hunger timing begins shifting to match your new eating window. The post-meal walk will feel unnecessary when you are full. Do it anyway. The 15-minute waiting period gives your stomach a chance to settle. Then 5 minutes of gentle movement. That is all. The GLUT4 activation begins within 90 seconds of movement. If you are finding this video helpful so far, hit like so the algorithm can show this to someone else who needs it. Someone who has been fighting these numbers for years and has never heard this information. Your support makes that possible. Now, Part 4 of Sun Simiao's system, the root code. Sun Simiao called them warming roots: cinnamon, ginger, turmeric. Roots and barks that Chinese and Indian physicians had been using for centuries. And I want to address the skepticism about this category directly, before it has time to take hold. I know what you are thinking. Cinnamon. Really? There was a period in the early 2000s where cinnamon was everywhere in health content. And then the criticism started. Some studies were inconsistent, some results did not replicate, and the pendulum swung. The criticism was not wrong. Some of the early cinnamon research was overinterpreted. Small studies, poorly controlled, results that were promising but not conclusive. But here is what the critics consistently missed. It was never about cinnamon alone. Cinnamon, ginger, and turmeric each contain distinct active compounds, and every single one of those compounds, through different molecular pathways, converges on the same target: AMPK, the master metabolic switch. Again, cinnamon's active compound, cinnamaldehyde, activates AMPK in liver and muscle cells. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, is one of the most studied natural AMPK activators in the scientific literature. A 2013 review in the journal Molecular Nutrition and Food Research documented its effects across multiple metabolic pathways, including glucose uptake and insulin signaling. Gingerol, the primary bioactive compound in ginger, has demonstrated insulin-sensitizing effects in both animal studies and human clinical trials. Every warming root in Sun Simiao's protocol targets the same pathway. Every single one, from entirely different molecular starting points, arriving at the same biological destination. Now, here is the research that I think about more than almost any other finding in this entire area. In 2008, researchers published a head-to-head randomized clinical trial comparing berberine, a compound extracted from the barberry plant, to metformin. 116 patients, both groups treated for 3 months. The result: berberine reduced fasting blood glucose by 26%. Metformin reduced it by 27%, statistically indistinguishable from each other. One is a pharmaceutical that generates billions of dollars in annual revenue. One is extracted from a plant that grows wild across multiple continents. Both activate AMPK. I will leave that observation where it sits. Now, the practical instructions for the root code. And I want to emphasize this: you do not need supplements. You do not need expensive proprietary formulas. You need your kitchen. Half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon in your morning drink. Coffee, tea, or warm water. Ceylon specifically. This is important. Not cassia cinnamon, which is the dark brown, strongly flavored cinnamon sold in most American grocery stores. Cassia contains high levels of coumarin, which in amounts beyond half a teaspoon daily can stress the liver over time. Ceylon cinnamon is lighter in color, more delicate in flavor, and contains only trace amounts of coumarin. Look for the label. It will say Ceylon or True Cinnamon. Health food stores carry it reliably. Some larger grocery stores as well. 1 inch of fresh ginger, grated or sliced, steeped in hot water for 10 minutes. Drink it with dinner or as an evening drink. If fresh ginger is unavailable or inconvenient, half a teaspoon of powdered ginger in warm water achieves a comparable effect. Turmeric in your cooking, 1/4 teaspoon per meal. And here is the part that almost everyone skips and should never skip. With black pepper. This is not optional. This is not a preference. This is biochemistry. Black pepper contains a compound called piperine. Piperine increases the bioavailability of curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, by up to 2,000%. Without black pepper, the majority of curcumin you consume passes through your digestive system without being absorbed. With black pepper, it gets in. 2,000% difference. From a pinch of black pepper. Now, drug interaction warnings for the root code. These matter. If you are on blood-thinning medications, warfarin, aspirin therapy, clopidogrel, or similar drugs, both turmeric and high amounts of ginger can increase anticoagulant effects. This raises bleeding risk. Talk to your doctor before adding therapeutic amounts of either. Sprinkle-level cooking use is generally considered safe, but therapeutic daily doses require a conversation. If you are on diabetes medications, Adding these root compounds creates compounding blood sugar lowering effects. Monitor your glucose closely in the first 2 weeks. Watch for symptoms of hypoglycemia, dizziness, shakiness, cold sweat, unusual hunger. If any of these occur, check your glucose and contact your doctor. For Ceylon cinnamon specifically, do not exceed 1 teaspoon per day. AMPK activation from cinnamon plateaus at modest doses. More is not better. Do not stop any prescribed medication without explicit guidance from your doctor. Never. This protocol works alongside your medication, not instead of it. By week 3 of running all 4 elements simultaneously, Margaret had a morning reading of 144, down from 193, 49 points in 3 weeks. She sent me a message at 7:58 in the morning. The message was just a number, 144, and then a period. And then, I haven't seen this number in 4 years. Her daughter called me 2 days later. She said, I don't know what has changed, but my mother is walking the neighborhood after every meal. She looks different. She sounds different. I asked her what she was doing, and she said, finally doing what the biology actually requires. I told Margaret to come in. I needed to talk about her second medication. But before I tell you what happened at that appointment, I need to give you something critically important. The piece that most people skip. The piece that determines whether results last. The expectation setter. Because here is what I know about human biology and human psychology and the intersection of the two. Week 1 of any new protocol is uncomfortable. Your gut is adapting to more fiber from the barley. The fenugreek water tastes unusual. Eating dinner 2 hours earlier feels strange. Your body is not a machine that simply accepts new inputs and optimizes overnight. Week 1, you will likely be in the bathroom more than usual. The increased dietary fiber from barley and fenugreek creates more gut activity. This is not a problem. This is your gut microbiome encountering a food environment it was designed for but has not seen in years. The adjustment takes 4 to 7 days. Push through it. Week 2, the digestive adjustment calms. Your eating timing begins to feel more natural. Your hunger signals start shifting toward your new meal window, and something small but measurable often begins happening to your morning glucose numbers. Not dramatic, but consistent. This is the week where most people who are going to quit. Because the result does not yet feel proportional to the effort. The discomfort of week 1 is still fresh. The dramatic improvement of week 3 has not arrived. Most people quit at day 4 or day 6, right before the inflection point. Week 3, this is the week I call patients to warn them about. Because in my experience, this is the breakthrough week. The week when the numbers start doing something they have not done in months. When the morning glucose shows a pattern instead of noise. When 2 separate patients in the same week told me, completely unprompted, that their afternoon energy felt different, steadier, more predictable. This is the week your gut microbiome, which has been quietly reshaping for 3 weeks, begins producing meaningful amounts of butyrate. The short-chain fatty acid that signals insulin sensitivity improvement through an entirely separate pathway from everything else you are doing. You are getting blood sugar support from 2 completely independent systems simultaneously by week 3, the food system and the microbiome system, and they reinforce each other, week 4 and beyond. The numbers that moved in week 3 continue moving, and the improvement compounds. Because the microbiome changes you initiated in week 1 are still progressing, still reshaping, still improving the biological environment that determines how your cells respond to insulin. Check your fasting glucose on day 28. Compare it to day 1. Write both numbers down. That comparison is the most honest answer to every skeptical question you might have right now. Now, I promise to tell you about the invisible 5th layer of Simiao's system, the one he could not have known about, the one that explains why everything he prescribed worked as a compound system, not just as individual ingredients. In 1990, no researcher in the world would have told you that the bacteria in your intestines had anything significant to do with your blood sugar. The science simply did not exist. By 2024, it is one of the most active areas of metabolic research being conducted anywhere in the world. Here is what science has now confirmed. Your gut contains approximately 38 trillion bacteria. 38 trillion, organized into hundreds of species, each with different metabolic functions. And the collective activity of those bacteria, your gut microbiome, directly affects how your body processes glucose. Specific species of gut bacteria, when they ferment dietary fiber, produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, propionate, acetate. These compounds travel through your bloodstream to your liver and muscle cells. And there, they trigger signaling cascades that improve insulin sensitivity. They help open the door. Through a pathway that has nothing to do with insulin itself. Research from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, published in Nature Medicine, showed that people with type 2 diabetes had measurably different gut microbiome compositions than metabolically healthy individuals. Specifically, significantly lower populations of the bacteria that produce butyrate. The door was not just locked from the insulin side, it was also failing to receive the butyrate signals that help it stay open. Now, here is the elegant part, the part that I think son Simiao would have appreciated if he had the vocabulary for it. The foods that produce the most AMPK activation also produce the most gut microbiome benefit. Beta-Glucan from barley feeds butyrate-producing bacteria. Bitter compounds from Fenugreek and bitter Melon promote the growth of beneficial microbiome species. Polyphenols from turmeric, ginger, and cinnamon act as prebiotics for the same beneficial species. Every element of Sun Simiao's system that affects blood sugar through a direct metabolic pathway also affects blood sugar through the gut microbiome pathway simultaneously. Two separate mechanisms, one dietary approach, compounding effects over weeks and months. He did not design it that way. Biology designed it that way. He just paid close enough attention to notice. Now, before you begin this protocol, there are 4 mistakes that will cancel everything I have described, and I see these in nearly every person who tries this and does not get the results they expected. Mistake 1, artificial sweeteners. I know, 0 calories sounds like the right choice for anyone managing blood sugar. Here is the problem. Artificial sweeteners, aspartame, sucralose, saccharin, disrupt the gut microbiome. Specifically, they reduce populations of the exact butyrate-producing bacteria you are trying to rebuild. A 2022 study published in Cell showed that even short-term consumption of certain artificial sweeteners caused measurable gut microbiome shifts and impaired glycemic control. The sweetener that does not disrupt gut bacteria. Pure stevia. Not every stevia product. Some are blended with erythritol or other compounds. Read the ingredient label. If it lists anything beyond stevia leaf extract or steviol glycosides, it is not pure stevia. Mistake 2, right foods at the wrong time. Eating a cup of barley at 9 p.m. produces a completely different blood sugar response than eating it at 6 p.m. The circadian insulin sensitivity decline I described means that the same food at the wrong time loses a significant portion of its benefit. The grain code and the timing protocol are not separate tools. They are designed to work together. Violate the timing, and the grain code loses much of its power. Mistake 3, root code compounds with high sugar foods. Cinnamon can buffer a glucose spike. It cannot stop a flood. Half a teaspoon of cinnamon in a bowl of sweetened cereal or on top of a sugar-heavy dessert is asking one small biological tool to handle a massive glucose load. The mechanism works within a range. Exceed the range and it cannot perform. Mistake 4, poor sleep. Even one night of under 6 hours of sleep raises cortisol significantly. Elevated cortisol directly triggers your liver, that warehouse I described, to release stored glucose. It also reduces insulin sensitivity the following day. You can run this protocol with perfect execution for 6 days. One night of poor sleep will undo a measurable portion of that progress, because sleep deprivation is a direct physiological stressor that overrides the gains your biology has been building. Sleep is not separate from blood sugar management. Sleep is part of the protocol. Now, let me give you the simple implementation plan, and I'm going to keep it simple on purpose because complexity is the enemy of follow through. Week 1, the grain code only. Replace white rice or white bread at your evening meal with pearl barley. 1 cup cooked, 1 meal, 1 change, nothing else different. At the end of week 1, check your fasting glucose and write it down. Week 2, add the timing protocol. Move your last meal 1 hour earlier than normal. Take a 5-minute walk 15 minutes after each meal. You are still eating barley at dinner. Just these 2 changes added to week 1. Week 3, add the bitter principle. 1 teaspoon of fenugreek seeds soaked overnight in water. Drink the water in the morning on an empty stomach. If you can access bitter melon, add it to 2 dinners this week. Everything from weeks 1 and 2 is still running. Week 4, add the root code, half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon in your morning drink, ginger steeped in the evening, turmeric with black pepper in your cooking. By week 4, all 4 elements are running simultaneously. The system is complete. The gut microbiome is reshaping in the background, and the compound effects are beginning to build. Check your fasting glucose on day 28. Compare it to day 1. Do not compare it to day 14. Compare it to day 1. Margaret reached her 3-month mark on a Thursday morning, A1C of 7.6, down from 9.2. Fasting glucose averaging 128, down from 193. Her endocrinologist reduced her second medication dosage under careful monitoring. Her kidney function markers, which had been trending in a concerning direction for 2 years, stabilized. She told me something at that appointment that I keep returning to. She said, "I spent 32 years telling patients their bodies had not failed them. That biology is not a verdict. That illness is not a character flaw. And I spent 6 years believing the exact opposite about myself." She paused. Then she said, "What son Simiao understood is that the body is always trying. It never stopped trying. It just needed the right signals. For 1,400 years, nobody could explain why the signals worked. But they worked. And now we know why, and that changes everything." She was right. Now, I told you at the beginning of this video that American researchers tested Sun Simiao's approach in the 1990s, and that the results should have been headline news. Here is what happened with those results. In 2002, the National Institutes of Health funded what became known as the Diabetes Prevention Program, one of the largest lifestyle intervention studies in history. Over 3,200 participants at high risk for type 2 diabetes, split into 3 groups. Group 1 received standard care, no changes. Group 2 received Metformin. Group 3 received specific dietary and lifestyle modifications, changes consistent with what Sun Simiao had been prescribing for 13 centuries. The results: Metformin reduced diabetes progression by 31%. Dietary and lifestyle changes reduced diabetes progression by 58%. Food and lifestyle changes beat medication by nearly double. In a rigorously controlled NIH-funded study involving over 3,000 participants. The research was published. It was cited extensively in the academic literature. It received some media coverage. And then the systemic change that should have followed did not happen. No insurance mandate was created to cover dietary counseling at scale. No medical school curriculum was significantly restructured. No public health campaign was designed and funded at a level proportional to the findings. Because there is no pill to prescribe at the end of a conversation about which grain to eat. There is no billing code for teaching someone about circadian insulin sensitivity. There is no reimbursement mechanism for explaining what gut microbiome bacteria produce butyrate. The knowledge survived, the same way Sun Simiao's system survived the fall of the Tang dynasty, the same way Sushruta's observations from 600 BC survived 2,000 years of empire and conquest. Because once you understand the biology, the system rebuilds itself in every generation, in every person who needs it. And it survived here in this video because you found it, and that matters. You now understand something that the majority of people managing blood sugar have never been told. You understand that the problem is not sugar. It is a cellular door that learned to distrust the key. Not broken, adapting. And adaptations can be reset. You understand that Sun Simiao identified the biological signals that reset that door 1,400 years before molecular biology existed to explain the mechanism, before anyone had named AMPK, before anyone understood the gut microbiome, before chronobiology existed as a scientific discipline. You understand that the NIH confirmed it. 58% reduction in disease progression, not from a new drug, from food, timing, and sequence that costs less than a few dollars a week. You understand the four elements, the grain code, barley, beta-glucan, the slow release that gives your cells a stream instead of a flood. The bitter principle, bitter melon and fenugreek activating AMPK, opening the cellular door through side entrances that insulin resistance cannot block. The timing protocol, last meal before dark, post-meal walking, using the circadian biology your cells evolved for. The root code, Ceylon cinnamon, ginger, turmeric with black pepper, all converging on the same AMPK pathway from different directions, compounding with every day of consistent use. And you understand the invisible fifth layer, your gut microbiome, quietly reshaping over weeks, building the bacterial populations that produce insulin sensitivity signals from the inside out. Today, you have the information. Now comes the part that is entirely up to you. And I do not say that to put pressure on you. I say it because it is genuinely true. Your next action does not require anyone's permission, does not require a prescription, does not require an expensive protocol. 1 cup of cooked pearl barley at dinner tonight. That is where it starts. That is where it has always started for every person who ran this system. If you watched this entire video, type "I finished" in the comments right now, and then share this with one specific person. Not a general share. One person. Your spouse, your brother or sister, your neighbor who has been fighting these numbers for years and is exhausted from fighting without the right information. Not to give them a video, to give them what Margaret gave herself, the information she deserved 6 years earlier. The biology is yours. It has always been yours. Next week, I need to tell you about something that runs in parallel to blood sugar elevation, something that is almost always present when blood sugar has been elevated for years, and that your glucose numbers will not show you. It involves your arterial walls, a process that most people have been told cannot be reversed, something you do every single morning, something you would never question, that may be accelerating it significantly. Most people managing blood sugar focus entirely on the glucose number, but what is happening inside your arteries at the same time is something completely separate and completely addressable, with something that is almost certainly already in your home. Subscribe and hit the bell right now, because next week's information, I genuinely wish I had shared with my patients a decade earlier than I did. I will see you there.